All right, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a concept that gets thrown around constantly in business, motivation. But we're going to move way past the basic stuff. We're diving deep into the source material to figure out how to completely transform motivation from this lazy, feel-good management slogan into a highly engineered strategic system. Because when it's done right, it drives massive organizational performance. So let's jump right in. Just doing a quick flyby of our agenda today, we're hitting 6 key areas. We've got the nature of motivation, decoding employee needs, belief and fairness, the absolute power of intrinsic motivation, how to actually design your compensation system, and finally, the ultimate talent retention model. It's going to be a great ride. Okay, section 1, the nature of motivation. Right off the bat, we need to challenge an incredibly outdated notion. For decades, a lot of leaders have treated motivation like it's just about having good morale or giving the team a really energetic pep talk. But honestly, that is just the tip of the iceberg. And that brings us to this incredibly traditional but deeply flawed management question: how do we make employees work harder? I mean, it sounds reasonable enough, doesn't it? But actually, it's totally superficial. Just telling people to work harder almost never yields sustainable results. Why? Because it completely ignores the actual mechanics of human behavior and how the systems we build dictate that behavior. So let's contrast these two mindsets. On one side, you had the traditional approach, just relying on empty slogans and raw effort. Give it 110%, right? On the other side, we have the strategic approach. Motivation is not some fleeting feeling. It's a highly calibrated system designed to actively align an individual's direction with the organization's goals. If your system is broken, I guarantee you even the absolute best business strategy is going to fail. What's really fascinating here is the actual anatomy of motivation. It's not a monolith. It's actually made up of 3 core components: intensity, direction, and persistence. And here's the kicker. High intensity, like working super hard, is entirely useless and honestly sometimes destructive without proper direction. It's like having a massive engine but no steering wheel. And without persistence, all that high intensity just fizzles out the second things get tough. You absolutely need all 3 of these operating in perfect harmony. Moving on to section 2, decoding employee needs. Now that we've got the structural definition down, let's look at the foundational psychological building blocks that actually drive how we behave at work. You're probably familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, going from basic physiological and safety needs at the bottom all the way up to social, esteem, and self-actualization. But why does this actually matter for a company? Well, it's because your motivation systems have to be dynamically layered depending on the role. Think about it. A frontline logistics worker might primarily be looking for safety, clear shifts, and stable pay. But your senior executives, they're hunting for self-actualization, strategic influence, leaving a legacy. You literally cannot use a one-size-fits-all policy to motivate everyone. It just won't work. Then we bring in Hertzberg's 2-factor theory, which blows up a massive misconception in management. There is a huge, surprising difference between what we call hygiene factors and true motivators. Simply removing dissatisfaction, like, say, providing a safe office and paying a decent salary, that doesn't automatically create high performance. It literally just stops people from being miserable. If you want true high-octane performance, you have to tap into actual motivators, things like a genuine sense of achievement, true autonomy, and doing meaningful work. All right, section 3, belief and fairness. Here, we're shifting gears from what people naturally need over to process theories. Specifically, we're talking about the exact mathematical logic of how your employees consciously calculate their effort before they even lift a finger. Consider the equation for expectancy theory. It's a pretty striking mental model because it is literally a multiplication problem. Motivation equals expectancy times instrumentality times valence. Expectancy is their belief that putting in the effort will actually lead to results. Instrumentality is the belief that those results will lead to a reward. And valence, that's how much they actually care about the reward you're offering. The absolute crucial takeaway here is this. If any single one of those 3 elements is 0, the entire equation collapses to 0. It doesn't matter if the bonus is $1 million if they don't believe your system is going to measure their results fairly. And that builds perfectly into equity theory, which captures exactly how humans are wired. We don't just exist in a vacuum, weighing our own outcomes against our own inputs. No, we are constantly side-eyeing the person sitting next to us. If an employee feels their ratio is lower than their colleagues, even if their own pay is objectively fantastic, their sense of perceived fairness is totally shattered, and their motivation will tank, for sure. Transparency and perceived equity are absolutely vital if you want to maintain trust. Which brings us to Section 4, the power of intrinsic motivation. This is a fascinating area because it explains exactly why micromanagement completely kills high-level knowledge work and just suffocates modern innovation. It really gets interesting when we break down self-determination theory into its three core psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. When companies actually tap into these, incredible things happen. Think about how Toyota builds unbelievable competence through Kaizen, their continuous improvement process. Or look at Microsoft. Under Satya Nadella, they completely shifted their culture away from brutal internal competition and focused heavily on relatedness, learning, and collaboration. They are intentionally fueling those deep, intrinsic drives. But a quick warning about autonomy. There's a brilliant rule of thumb here. Effective autonomy equals freedom within strategic boundaries plus accountability. The golden rule is that true autonomy is not some chaotic free-for-all. Actually, scratch that. It's a recipe for disaster if you do it that way. Giving freedom without strict, clear boundaries and real accountability just creates organizational chaos. It absolutely must be structured. Okay, Section 5, designing the compensation system. So how do we actually build this structure? This is where the rubber meets the road for leaders. Architecting an organizational compensation system that harnesses all these powerful psychological drives we've been talking about. Consider this fundamental rule very, very carefully. What gets measured gets managed. What gets rewarded gets repeated. This completely highlights the extreme danger of poorly designed KPIs. If you measure and reward the wrong things, like, let's say, only rewarding short-term sales volume and totally ignoring customer satisfaction, you are inevitably going to push your team toward destructive behaviors. They are going to do exactly what you pay them to do, even if it ends up hurting the company in the long run. And this perfectly captures the tension literally every executive faces. Short-term incentives are great for driving rapid growth, hitting quarterly profits, getting quick sales, but if you rely solely on them, leadership might end up sacrificing the company's future just to hit today's targets. You absolutely must balance those out with long-term incentives. We're talking things like ESOPs, employee stock ownership plans, or performance shares to build real, sustainable value. The goal is aligning the employee's personal timeline with the company's long-term lifespan. Finally, Section 6, the talent retention model. Let's pull everything together into a tangible corporate system. We want to see the exact, unbroken pipeline from individual psychology all the way to keeping your absolute best people. Think of this as the ultimate PhD research model in action. It is a sequential, totally unbroken chain. It has to start with building genuine motivation through everything we've covered today. That motivation then translates into deep engagement with the work itself. That engagement is the engine that actually drives high performance. And then, when people perform well inside a fair system that recognizes their effort, that ultimately secures long-term talent retention. You literally cannot skip a step in this pipeline and expect it to work. And I really want to emphasize this specific number: 0. 0 is the exact amount of long-term retention you are going to get if you only rely on paying people without building clear career paths, fair KPIs, and a true culture of recognition. The source material highlights this perfectly with fast-growing enterprises like VietDak. When a company is scaling rapidly, those ad hoc bonuses and informal agreements from the early days, they just aren't enough anymore. You need a transparent, trusted system. Otherwise, your absolute best talent is just going to walk right out the front door. Which leads us to the end of today's explainer, and I want to leave you with one final, pretty provocative question. I want you to look at your own company and ask yourself, what behavior is your system currently encouraging? Honestly, don't look at the mission statement on the wall. Look at the paychecks, look at the KPIs, look at who actually gets promoted. Are you inadvertently rewarding the exact behaviors you're actively trying to eliminate? It is a really tough question to answer, but facing it is the first step to building a truly high-performing organization. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today, and keep questioning the system.